Your story matters, don't let it fade. When everything changed, you were made.
Hello, and welcome back to the One Stories Radio Network. This is our podcast. I'm Wendy Babcock, and today I'm joined with Vanessa Cook. Welcome, Vanessa.
Hello, everyone.
So, Vanessa, we have known each other a really long time. So, I could introduce you, but I would prefer that you, because I've got to be with you for a few different iterations of your business and watch the growth and like what you've become, especially as a speaker. It's been really fun and just very inspiring to watch. So, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what it is you do?
My name is Vanessa, and I'm the founder of Starlight and Sage. The last time I was on this podcast, I was the founder of Soul Revival Holistic Health Coaching. So I am a mom to 7 beautiful children, and I started my journey through holistic healing as a runner and someone who kind of stumbled upon some healing through health and physicality. And I kind of hit the ground running with wanting to help other women at the time figure out who they were. So fast forward to now, it has been a pretty wild journey of recognition that there was so much more that I could offer. So now I actually help people in all walks of life through every facet of their journey. So that could be health-wise or mind or spirit. And I really found this incredible calling to be a support person for someone versus just simply a holistic health coach.
And all of this makes so much sense from what I've known of you through the years is you've always been about the whole person. Even when you were doing more specifically the health coaching, it was still all about the whole person and kind of doing that study of one and just working with them on what they need and not just doing a one size fits all sort of program. And I've always appreciated that about you. And so now that you've brought in these other modalities, can you talk a little bit about some of the things you kind of touched on the different things that you do, but like break it down to more specifics, like, the breath work and those type of things.
When I decided that soul revival was no longer something that aligned with me anymore, it was because I was getting like the same repeated, I don't want to call it problems, but like obstacles that I couldn't get over with the women who were joining me. Despite the fact that I was all about the whole person and mind, body, and soul, even back then, women were coming to me for very specific purposes. And the majority of them were gravitating towards me because my story was all about how I released 85 pounds. And most of the women came to me for that specific purpose and also came to me with like this idea or notion that I had like a magic button, because that's kind of what we all have heard in this social media realm, is that like there's this one thing that you can do. And I was taking them on these journeys, and what I was discovering was, even though I was catering it to their physicality, where they were in their menstrual cycles, where they were in life, we were like missing these bigger components. Some of the women would release the weight, but then other physical ailments like their autoimmune disease or their hormones, it wasn't also getting the same sort of relief. And I was really frustrated because I was like, okay, what did I do in my own journey that allowed me to release the weight, but also heal from an autoimmune and also feel better as a human being and like my spirituality? And I had this massive breakthrough of like, well, girl, you literally uprooted your entire way of thinking, of believing, of presenting yourself. Why aren't you asking these women to do the same thing? So then I educated myself with different holistic modalities, and I got into breath work. And that was always kind of a teeny tiny part of Soul Revival. But then I went into like getting my certification and understanding the power that is something that we literally do 24/7 every day and not think about it, which is the ability to really regulate your nervous system through breathing, and moreover to take back control of trauma triggers, which led me into my certification for trauma healing, and then further made me understand that if I was going to be helping women and wanting to expand on humans in general and not just this niche thing of only supporting women, I needed to understand more fully the human condition And then that led me into relationship coaching and tantric sexuality and sensuality. And I finally realized that through all of these certifications and all of this education that I was giving to myself, I could look at a human being and say, okay, I really see you now. I don't just see your physical body. I don't just see your health ailments. Now I see what has led you to this very moment and why you're in front of me now. And that has been so incredible and so beautiful.
And it's a lot, which is it is, but in the best possible way, because I feel like we are such a whole person, and we have it's not just what we're eating, it's not just our mindset, it's not just whatever the just you want to put in there. And so I love that, someone gets in front of you and just has a conversation, I'm assuming like a consultation, and it kind of opens up their world to you, and then for that person to feel so seen. And then you just say, okay, here's maybe the different routes we're going to take, or a combination of things, or whatever that looks like. I can't even imagine like the results your clients must be having from that. So let's talk a little bit about, your clients and, some results, or what have people seen like with working with you?
So I have a couple of clients that I'm thinking about right now because their journeys have been really extraordinary in the most peculiar way. One of my clients, she came to me because she was like, "Oh, you're a holistic health coach, and I can't lose weight, and I can't do the things that I used to do. I used to be a runner. I used to be more in shape, and like I know I'm in menopause now, or about to be in menopause." And I said, okay, well, let's do a discovery call. And in my brain, I was going, okay, girl, like, that being a holistic health coach no longer aligns with you, but let's see what she has to say. And she decided that she wanted to come into my space. I offer virtual or in person. It was really important for her to come into my space. And it ended up turning into a meeting not about her physical body or her hormones. It became like an outpouring of the trauma that she experienced. And it was just like one question that I had asked her. And to be very honest, I don't even remember like what the question was. And then suddenly she was telling me all of these things that she hasn't said out loud to her significant other, that she hasn't said out loud to her very best friend. And when we got done, she was like, I just wanted you to be my fitness coach. And I just smiled so big at her and I said, no, now I get to be someone so much more profound for you. And I'm going to teach you how to not need me. And I'm going to teach you how to finally figure out how to come back home to yourself. And we have been on this beautiful, incredible journey. And she was kind of one of those women who were like, we all have childhood things. We all go through stuff, but like, it's fine. It's not trauma. And then we recognized how every part of her existence was built upon all of the things that she perceived to not be trauma in her life. So now I can already see the amount of, she's been with me for almost 5 months now, the amount of confidence that she has now. She couldn't even tell you like what she liked. She couldn't tell you her favorite color, her hobbies. Wow. She was just like, I don't know. We're adults. Do we still ask those questions? And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
heck yeah. Like my favorite color is pink, man.
Yeah. Yes.
And yeah, and so now she gets to tell you like all of the things that bring joy into her life, whereas before she couldn't even answer that question. And there was no judgment. It was just simply seeing that she didn't even know that she wasn't happy until she finally got to say the things that other people would have judged her for. And that's just what I get to be.
Wow. I love what you said about coming back home to yourself, because I feel like working with you, it's not just coming back home, but it's kind of clearing out the clutter, right? We can come back home to ourselves and come into a house of a hoarder of trauma and all the bad things, right? But I feel like you're helping clean the house when they come back home to themselves and come back home, that it's to a nice Zen place and a place of like where you feel comfortable and you get to be yourself and learn more about yourself. And if you're listening, so if anyone's met Vanessa or you meet Vanessa, you'll learn quickly Vanessa is not a surface level person. You always go deep. And I don't care what kind of conversations it is, whether it's, at a conference or just on Zoom or wherever, like Vanessa will go deep. And that's why I think your client had that experience with you. Because you asked a question, even if it maybe didn't seem like it's something memorable or whatever, but the client, it made them go deeper and look into themselves. And that's huge. And not everyone has that gift.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the biggest thing that I want anybody to experience or to know in general, even if they're not working with me, is that you don't need a singular business or person or a trend or influencer. You only need yourself. You need to
Mm.
build trust not with another human being, but build trust with yourself and like really go back into who you are and who you were before we like destroyed ourselves into believing that we were someone else. I don't want somebody leaving thinking, I need Vanessa for the rest of my life. I need Starlight and Sage for the rest of my life. I want them to leave with like this profound journey and relationship and to look back and realize I didn't do any of the work. They did. I'm not healing them. They're healing themselves. And I think that is like the most beautiful and life-changing gift that anybody can give to someone is the ability to show them that it was them all along.
Oh gosh, I love that. And what stands out to me, especially in the coaching world, entrepreneurial, especially when you're told repeat customers, keep your clients, but I've never really aligned with that either. I'm always like, I want you to do your thing and then I want to set you free. Go out in the world and do your thing. I want them to be better because they got to work with me. But as you're saying, it's like you can lead them, but they still have to do all the work. It's not a magic button, it's not the easy button. They still have to do the work. You're just kind of guiding them along the path, but they still have to do all the walking, which is,
Yes.
really amazing. So speaking of a path, let's talk a little bit about your journey. Obviously, you did your one story, and if you're listening to this podcast right after our interview, we're going to play the audio of Vanessa's new one story because she's been on the stage before. And so just watching the growth from the first one story to now, and then hearing this story was just like, I cried even during rehearsal, but even like in coaching, I cried, rehearsal, I cried. And then when you did on stage, I cried. I'm like, it's just such a deep story. Even if you don't relate to the specific story, I think people relate to it regardless, So do you want to talk a little bit about the journey then? I mean, obviously doing a second story and telling this one specifically.
Yeah, so my first story, like I've been kind of alluding to this whole time, I thought that I needed to tell this story in a way that, like, if you looked at me on stage, if you heard my journey, that it was like very palatable for like the quote unquote normal person. And I really like sheltered everything that I was saying. I was like, I can't say the specifics of the trauma that I experienced. I couldn't say that even back then. I didn't align with the religion that I was in or like the belief system that I had put myself into this box with. And when I heard that you were doing one stories and that it was going to be on the improv stage and it was going to be in front of a live audience, I could not stop thinking about the fact that I had been becoming like my most authentic self for such a long time, but still silencing what I wanted because I was so afraid that people weren't going to book with me, that people were going to look at me like I wasn't a good human being, or that I was going to upset the clients that I did have because none of my clients knew what my belief system was. Anytime they would ask me about my beliefs or ask me to allow them to walk through their own beliefs, I did it with a smile on my face. I've had all kinds of religious beliefs and non-beliefs in my presence, and I've always just gone with whatever they need. Because again, it's not about me, it's about them. And so I was really terrified. I was like, okay, if I say this next part, it's forever. Like I can't take it back. But I felt like so many people needed to hear, especially nowadays and in today's climate, that it's
Mhm.
okay to walk away from something that you genuinely believed was going to like quote unquote save your life,
Yeah.
and it wasn't going to break you. It was going to allow you to come back home. And I know I keep saying that, but genuinely, that's what happened when I walked out of the church that I had been going to. And when I walked away from religion, it wasn't about religion. It was about walking away from trauma that I was putting on myself, that I was consistently creating for myself because I genuinely believed that if I walked away, I would no longer be a good person. Um, and everything changed when I did that. Like that was like such a huge win moment. My husband changed, my kids changed, my friends changed, my clients changed, my business changed. And I can genuinely say, without a shadow of a doubt, I am the happiest and strongest I have ever been in my entire life because I no longer am holding on to something that felt like it was suffocating me.
Yeah. And I knew there was like a little anxiety going into the live event, right?
Yeah.
And then it is a spot in the talk where you're like, okay, wasn't sure if I was going to say this or not, but I just wanted to kind of give like, it's kind of a disclaimer about, like,
Yeah.
hey, you're going to hear this and you might have some judgments around it, but this is my story, which I thought was
Yeah.
really important. But after getting off the stage, after you actually said the thing and it's out there now and you did your YouTube premiere, what was that anxiety inducing as well? Like now the world's going to see this besides the closed audience we had, how is that? How's it been since?
Yeah, so it was a lot of anxiety. I did all of my breathwork techniques. I did everything, which like if you know me as a human being and as a client, I tell everybody all the time, I'm human too. And just because I know everything doesn't mean that I don't struggle to implement some of those strategies and some of those tools. So I did have a lot of anxiety, and since getting off stage, to be very honest, I've had a really interesting mixed review and commentary. I've had
Good.
people come into my inbox, taking away that I was begging for salvation again. um, and instead of being upset that like they didn't get the deeper meaning, like it wasn't about religion, it wasn't about
Right.
Christianity, it wasn't about me saying, hey, religion is bad, and more specifically the church that I went to was bad. It was me saying it wasn't for me.
Right.
It wasn't good for me. And so I didn't get angry. I actually messaged every single person back, and I felt so strong after it because I said, I am so thankful that you have such a profound belief that makes you happy, that makes you believe that that is the answer. And I'm so thankful for that because it means that you're living in your own authenticity.
Yeah.
But no, thank you.
Right. And that's the beauty of it. And, and I admire people who are so convicted to what they believe. That's wonderful for them. Good for
Yes.
you, not for me, depending on like what
Mhm.
that's what you're saying. But I love that
Yeah.
you approached it with love. I mean, it would be easy to
Yes.
get kind of like butthurt over it and be like, wow, you
Mhm.
didn't listen to the whole. And so, some of those conversations where people, did you hear the opposite then of people like, oh my God, thank you for saying that, or I had this experience?
That was the overwhelming majority, I will
Okay,
say.
good.
And I was so, so thankful for it. I cried a lot. I still,
Aw,
when I get the messages, when I get the people who come up to me and tell me, like, I didn't know that I needed you to say that until I heard it. Um, I'll get choked up about it now. It makes me so happy that you provided a platform for us to be able to connect with human beings on that level and to be able to like save them from that like existential crisis that they're going
right,
through and to like know that they're really not alone. Like we're so
right.
connected. We have social media, we have the internet, we have all of the things, and we can still feel so alone in our journey. And it's
Yeah,
not that way. There's so many people who experience similar journeys, and like to be able to be in partnership with them for that, like that would it's
yeah.
been incredible. So,
So you get me choked up
yeah,
too when I hear the
I know.
stories. But I feel like you, it's like the stage is the vehicle, but you have to drive it. Like you have to get up on the stage and do the thing and do the work. So it's
Yeah.
how you coach is how I feel like with one story. It's like I'm just providing the route, but you still have to do the work. You have to get up there and actually say the things that's going to relate to the people that are going to be messaging you now and saying, "Oh my gosh, this changed everything for me." Because and that's the point of one stories is to tell your story even the hard ones, because a lot of these things are the things we don't talk about out loud because we're so afraid of the backlash, right? And especially that you got overwhelmingly good and some like, and maybe it's not classified as quote unquote bad, but just like their interpretation of what you said,
Yeah.
and how they perceived it in their own perception. We always look at things through our own perception, and that's what these stories do is they just kind of open up the conversation of what do I believe? What did I hear? How do I interpret it? And how do I move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes
Yeah.
courage. It takes courage for you to even reach out and say anything to someone,
Right.
whether it was like a comment like, "Hey, I watched it." Like there were some people who were like, "I wasn't even sure if I was going to tell you I watched it because I didn't want anybody else to know." And that's okay too.
Wow.
Like I don't ever take offense to clients who don't want anybody else to know that they're working with me, or for people to say like, "I watched it, but please don't tell anybody I watched it," because it just means that that's their own journey and that they're not quite ready yet. And that's okay. Like there's no
Yeah.
pushing, there's no like time frame. It's when you decide that something needs to change or that you need to walk into what you've been feeling and desiring, and there's no
Yeah.
timeline for that.
Wow. That's so true. I love that you stepped into that. It's really stepping into courage to share that story because I know there was a lot of reservations and we talked about it through coaching and everything. And I'm glad you had a really supportive group in your cohort that were like, yeah, get up there and say the thing,
Yes, for sure.
because, you know, but thank you again, Vanessa, for just trusting the process, for getting on stage, telling your story, and for being so vulnerable and just walking with courage and then leading with courage for your clients too. So I just appreciate you.
Yes, I appreciate you more than I could ever say. I don't ever stop talking about Wen stories and what you've done for the world. And I genuinely believe just everyone's going to catch it. And having a voice and a stage to be able to finally say what needs to be said is like one of the most powerful things that we can have as a human being.
I 100% agree. I agree. So, and I think that's what's going to change the world, honestly, saying the hard
Same.
things out loud. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you again for being a guest on the One Stories Radio Network. Up next is going to be Vanessa's One Story. So now you get to hear what we've been talking about in full. So thank you again, Vanessa.
Your story matters, don't let it fade. When everything changed, you were made.
When everything changed, I was 16 years old, and I was kneeling at an altar. The green, scratchy carpet beneath my knees, my arms shaking from being held up for what seemed like years. A crying, screaming woman at each arm holding them up. And they were praying and speaking in tongues, and they just kept saying, "Just let it go. You just have to surrender. Let God move through you." And I stood there, kneeling on the floor, and I began sobbing for hours and begging and pleading because I truly believed that if it didn't happen that night, I would never be worthy. Not worthy of God, of love, or heaven. And I kept finding myself thinking about the fact that just hours before that, I was being a teenage girl in my boyfriend's truck, desperate to feel wanted. And now here I was trying to earn back something that I didn't even realize I had already lost. And I kept thinking, why would God choose me? Why would I ever be worthy of his love? And then my mouth began to move. Words I didn't understand and sounds I couldn't control, and the room erupted. You did it! You did it! Praise Jesus! You're filled! And just like that, I was allowed to put my arms down. I was allowed to stop crying. I was allowed to be still. And for the first time that night, I finally felt worthy. So, before I move on with my story, I just wanted to say this. We kind of figured out are you going to say this? Are you not? But I realized that a lot of you guys don't know who I am in this room. So, I wanted to say that this is my story. It's my lived experiences, my interpretation, and it's my journey to healing and coming back home to myself. And I share my story today not to disparage anyone or to take away from anybody else's religion or beliefs or the truth that they have found in their own healing journey. I share my story today because I know what it feels like to lose yourself. And I know what it feels like to finally come back home. Because there are moments in our life that don't just change us, they split us. There's a version of you before it and a version of you after it. And one of those moments for me was the moment that I learned how to abandon myself. And the thing about moments like that, where you abandon yourself, you don't really realize until much later. So here's what I didn't understand at 16 that took me years to finally understand. That night wasn't the night that I became worthy. It was the night that I learned that love had to be earned through suffering, that my body needed to perform in order to be accepted, and that who I naturally wasn't enough. And when a belief like that takes root inside of you, it doesn't just follow you into church. It follows you into your home, into your relationships, and into your choices. And so I began to be the girl that looked for love in all of the wrong places. I gave too much, I stayed too long, and I abandoned myself before anybody else could, because I truly believed that if I was just good enough, or if I just did something long enough, that I would finally earn love. Because growing up, I didn't feel seen or heard or loved or supported. I grew up in chaos. And the thing about a belief like that is that it doesn't disappear when you grow up, it evolves. So as an adult, I found myself going back to church because it was the only way that I could be good again. And I sat there in the pew and I listened to the pastor speak about things that just didn't sit right in my body. Rules and judgment and shame and who could be worthy and who could not. And there was this voice inside my body saying, this isn't right. But I ignored it because I was taught that I couldn't trust myself. And I spent 5 years in that church cultivating these amazing relationships. And I had met this woman that I was so shocked wanted to be my friend. She was this beautiful, whole, godly woman who had made sure that her kids were raised in church. And here she was talking to me, this crazy-haired girl with tattoos and piercings. And I thought, okay, she wants to be my friend. So for the next 5 years, we cultivated a relationship where I thought that I was loved and accepted. And so I began telling her things about my life and about my trauma and the things that I had done and secrets that I hadn't even told anyone before. And then there was these incredible people who came into my life and they shared with me messages from God. And I thought, oh my gosh, finally, he sees me. He sees how hard I've been working. There's no way that these women could know anything about me unless it was from God. Until one day, the foundation of the last 5 years cracked underneath me. And I found out that the woman that I had believed had loved me so much and accepted me was the very person who stripped everything away. She had traded an addiction of drugs and alcohol and sex for an addiction of Jesus and church and saving people in the same way that she had been saved. So she told these women, you have to tell Vanessa this. It's the only way she's going to be saved. And I stayed in church. I didn't leave. I thought, okay, God, here we are. I'm not turning my back on you, and you are not going to turn your back on me. He's going to see it. I'm finally going to be worthy. This is it. Until one day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. And I walked out of church. And I went home, and I climbed up the stairs to my room. And there I was, kneeling on my floor again, begging and sobbing, God, please, can't you hear me? Can I not be worthy now? I need you to give me a sign, please. Give me anything, God. But there was silence. There was no booming voice, no moment of clarity handed to me. It was just me. And for the first time, I had to sit with the very real possibility that the voice I had been waiting for my entire life was my own. And it was in that moment that something sacred happened. It wasn't about losing connection. It was about reclaiming it in a way that finally felt true to me. And it was in that season that I had the realization that everything I had been taught my whole life was the very belief that kept me disconnected from myself. And healing didn't come in a lightning bolt. It came in fragments. Moments in time where my body would whisper, "This isn't right." And I would listen. And then I started questioning, why did I feel such shame for simply being a human? Why did I always feel like I had to perform in order to be accepted? And why did my body feel like a place I had to escape from instead of one that I got to live in? And one of the things that haunted me the most after I stepped away from religion was trying to understand how the hell my body did something that felt so freaking real. How could I spend my teenage years and young adult life speaking in tongues and then grow up and spend 5 years speaking in tongues? And sometimes I would go into church and it would immediately start pouring out of me. And while I was in praise and worship, and while I prayed over people and I prayed over myself, and now I couldn't do it to save my life. Those words were not coming out of my mouth. And it wasn't until one day that I sat down with my therapist and she said, "Vanessa, your body learned that church was a survival environment. What you believed was spiritual performance was actually protection." And then it made sense. My body learned how to survive in an environment in which love and acceptance and worthiness was conditional. And I realized in that I needed to make these greater changes and that my body really wasn't broken. My mind wasn't lost. My soul wasn't damaged. I was just disconnected. And I even remember this moment where I went to church one time. I had married a man. So guess what that meant? I was having sex in marriage. I was dressing the way I was supposed to be dressing. I wasn't cussing. I wasn't drinking. I was doing it all right. I had to be good enough. And I was at church and I was praying and I was like, all right, I got this. And then the pastor came up to me and he placed his large hand on my head, gripping it firmly, shaking. And he began to pray over me and speak in tongues. And then speaking in a language for everybody else to understand as well. And he began to pray over me, prayed for God to save my soul, to release the sins out of my life, the demons that made me unworthy, and to save me from myself. And I thought, well, damn, even now, I'm still being told that there is something wrong with me. And when I stepped away from church, it came at a cost too. I finally told my loved ones and the people that I was closest with that I had walked away from something that had made me feel so unworthy for so long. And I was finally happy. I no longer felt like I wasn't enough, and I was able to do things and experience things and finally feel the way that I had felt my whole life without guilt. And instead of being faced with happiness and support, they looked at me in disgust. And they also walked away from me. And in a small town, when you make a decision like that, it doesn't stay quiet for very long. And man, those rumors. I learned things about me and my husband I didn't even know. We were living our best life. We just didn't catch up yet, apparently. But something else happened as well. The feeling of not having external acceptance no longer became more painful than losing myself. And then my family began to change. They became lighter and more at peace and happier. And then my children began coming to me and sharing with me all of the ways that they themselves hadn't felt safe in church. And all the things that they had done in church because they thought it was going to make mom happy. And it was in that moment that I finally realized that I wasn't just breaking a cycle for myself. I was breaking it for my children and those I loved. And that wasn't rebellion. That was coming home. It was coming home back to my body, to my truth, to my worth. And that realization didn't just change my life. It actually changed the lens through which I lead today. So now I'm the owner of Starlight and Sage, and I get to help other people discover the difference between performance and truth. And I get to help women rediscover parts of themselves that they had abandoned and learned how to silence because somebody told them that they had to. And I taught myself so many different holistic healing modalities, and I get to be this beautiful support for women who didn't even know that they had a voice, or get to experience things that they have never gotten to experience because they were met with so much judgment and shame. And I get to be that support person for them now. And it's not because I have all of the answers. It's because I know what it feels like to be disconnected. And I know how beautiful it is to finally come back home to yourself. And what I've learned is that there's a couple of ways that we disconnect from ourselves. We first disconnect from our body. We ignore our intuition. We override exhaustion. We feel like we need to perform in order to earn our worth. And then we disconnect from our truth. We shrink. We silence ourselves. We say yes when we mean no. And eventually, we disconnect from our worth. We become smaller versions of ourselves, believing that love must be earned. But healing isn't becoming someone new. Healing is coming back to the version of yourself that you learned how to abandon because the world told you that you had to. And so what I want to do with all of you guys today, if you feel safe, I would love it if you could close your eyes for a moment. And as you close your eyes, I want you to take some nice, deep breaths in through your nose and gently blow the breath out through your mouth, slowly placing one hand on your heart and one on your belly, keeping that beautiful deep breath going. And I want you to ask yourself, where have I learned that I'm not enough? And I don't want you to judge it or fix it. Just breathe. And then if we could take a nice deep collective breath together, gently opening your eyes again. Awareness is where everything begins. I used to think that night at 16 years old was the moment that I found God. But now I understand it was the moment that I lost myself. And it's funny because I used to believe that this sign was the sign of worthiness, of acceptance. I used to think of it as pleading and asking something outside of myself to finally say, I'm enough. But now, when I raise my arms, it's because I'm dancing in my kitchen like a crazy person, or I'm cheering for someone, or I'm cheering for myself. Because I finally came home to my body, home to my truth, and home to my worth. You were never meant to earn love through suffering. You were never meant to earn worthiness through performance. You have always been worthy. Not when you get it right, not when you're chosen, but exactly as you are right now. Thank you.
Your story matters, don't let it fade. When everything changed, you were made.